but we're going to record it. So we started in 2014. We've had sessions, and we really want to promote education, we want to promote leadership. One of the things that we have realized as well is that it's not just so much about promoting leadership, but it's about changing mindsets. So as we think through this whole process of engaging and learning, I know we have a lot signed up, 100 people signed up for this session. So with that said, let me go ahead and start thinking about reading and writing, right? When you pick up a book, it's about the plot, it's about the characters, it's about how these characters, you can actually see them and you can feel them. And the book is unpredictable, and you put it down, and you're like, wow, this was something that has been fantastic. Well, I've had the pleasure of having read both Ellen and Mukuka's books, and that's what they did to me. So, with that said, let me go ahead and start out with our title for today is The Power and Importance of Writing Our Unique Zambian Stories. And I'll start off with introducing Ellen. We did say they are award winning, we didn't make that up. And Ellen has won the Macmillan's Writers Prize for Africa. She's also won the Commonwealth Short Story Competition, and she's also won the Penguin Prize for African Writing. And it's such a pleasure, as you heard, if you were on the call earlier, we were in school together. And it's just delightful when you can go onto the website and Google her name and all the amazing stories that she's written. She was also awarded the Zambia Arts Council Ngoma Chairperson's Award. So here are her books, right? So the two, Patchwork and Madam First Lady, just fantastic books. And I think earlier on, Chenny asked Ellen, like, how are you able to transition from writing for adults and writing for children? And she's written all these books. So you'll hear a little bit more. I'm not going to steal the thunder, but just to give you an idea as to how talented she is. Now I'm going to go ahead and introduce our other speaker, Mukuka, who is an aerospace engineer. Just fantastic, right? You think aerospace engineer writing, how does he even have time to write? And again, Mukuka is award winning. He has won Best First Book, as well as he has won the Gold for General College level book, both from the American Literary Classics. So here are his books, Five Nights Before the Summit. I read that and it was just amazing. More recently, The Casualty of Power. I was flying from Zambia back to the States. And you know, that's an 18-hour flight. It felt like 9 because I was reading the book. It was just fantastic. So, with that said, I am going to let Ellen introduce herself and tell us a little bit more about her inspiration and thoughts, and then we'll take it from there. So go ahead, Ellen.
Thank you, Frida. Thank you, everybody who's logged in from wherever you are. Where do I start? My name is Ellen, and I'm a writer. It's taken me a long time to actually to actually make that statement. I am a writer. And over the years, I've tried to figure out why I've actually struggled with that. Why is it a challenge for me to embrace being a writer? And my understanding of it, because I've tried to make sense of it, is one of two things. Growing up in Zambia, when I was growing up in the 70s and the 80s, there weren't many visible Zambian writers. And I think when you're growing up, you aspire to be what you see. So if you don't see a writer, it doesn't occur to you that it can actually be a profession you can pursue. So for me, that's what made me perhaps struggle to sort of say I'm a writer, or get to a place where I can identify myself as a writer. The other reason is I think in life, you're a product of your environment. So when you grow up in an environment where the arts or the creative industry, there's a certain perception about it. Eventually you take on that perception as well, that certain vocations, particularly those in the arts industry, are perhaps leisure, they're hobbies, and perhaps are of less value than other vocations around you. And even though it's not a conscious effort, I think unconsciously you sort of adopt that value system. So you start seeing writing as something that is not of value for you. And even though I think for me, it then becomes a challenge to embrace being a vocation that you grew up not seeing as one of value. And just to say, yes, I know I've said that there weren't many Zambian writers, but when I was growing up, there were some books in the house which were Zambian writers. For instance, Dominic Malaisho, who wrote 2 main books many years ago. He was published by the same publisher who wrote Chinua Achebe's Things Fall Apart. I'm sure if you were at school in Zambia, we've all read that book at some point. And so it was a book books that I saw, The Tongue of the Dam, The Smoke That Thunders. There were books like Kenneth Kaunda's A Letter to My Children, Zambia Shall Be Free. But even just of those 2 authors that I've mentioned here, what were they? Dominic Malaisho was an economist first, a very high civil servant, and then he wrote a book. Kenneth Kaunda, who was he? He was the president of Zambia, and then he wrote a book. So in a way, even that scenario sort of reinforces the idea that writing is an other. It's something you do apart from taking it as your main vocation. And it sticks with you, albeit unconsciously. And I think sometimes when something is unconscious, you actually soak it up more than something that's conscious. So for me, it's always been sort of like a struggle, to a point that even when I started writing, I always remember when I would travel, I'm writing, we go to literature festivals, I'm traveling in different countries. And those days, less and less so now, but no, those days we all had you had to fill out a landing card. And there was a question, what's your occupation? And it took me such a long time to be able to fill in the word writer as my profession. I would struggle. I would put housewife or put whatever else I could put, but it took me a long time to actually put writer. And that's what made me start thinking, why am I so, and why do I feel uneasy about this? What is my challenge? So for me, the issue and the point I'm making is, even before I step out into the environment as a Zambian writer, into an environment in Zambia where we have, one, a very poor reading culture. We have what we call printers as opposed to publishers, in the sense of the role that what they do at the moment, if you want to get published, most of them anyway. We have a system where the infrastructure to support a writer or creative industry is not so strong. So even before I step out into those external factors and challenges, I'm dealing with my own personal internal conflicts about being a writer. So I think because of that, it took me a long time to start writing. And now I fast forward to something like 2003, I'm in Ghana, and I start thinking, no, I had this urge to write, and I start writing a book for adults. Then I see a competition for children. So I thought, okay, so that I can sort of train myself to write and the discipline. It's always good, I'll say that to all aspiring writers, try very much to join things like competitions. Not so much to win, but it gives you that discipline to write something of quality within a set time. So I joined this Macmillan Prize, and it was basically for a children's book. And I thought, okay, let me at least try and write this. So I was very surprised when it came through and I'd won that competition. And I thought, okay, maybe it's just a passing time, I've done this. At that point, I hadn't shared with anybody that I was writing. I think Linda was the one person actually who I did share with that I was writing, but I didn't really say to anybody else because I was in Ghana at the time. I then go on to it was like a fellowship for writers run by the British Council with African writers. And what they did is they paired the British writer with an African writer, and they gave you feedback one-on-one. And I had this writer who was a British woman, very good, but the one issue she had with my writing, she kept saying, your short stories don't read like short stories. They read like a summary of a novel. And she kept coming back with that. So at some point, I found out about the Commonwealth Short Story Competition, and I thought, okay, let me enter this competition, as I said, just so that I get the discipline to try and write a short story. So I was really amazed when that went on to win the overall Commonwealth. I wasn't expecting it at all, because for me, it was just to practice and hone my short writing skills, story writing skills. Having said that, I've never done a short story again. I think they're the most challenging genre to write. So I don't normally write them, but that was my attempt at doing that. And from there, I went on and wrote university. I went to and did patchwork, and I wrote other books. I've since done quite a lot of teaching. I teach creative writing. I've done a lot of workshops across Africa for African women writers, for children in schools. When I go to Zambia, I try to go into schools a lot to try so that they can see a writer and aspire to be writers, to encourage readings. I sort of taking books to donate so we can read. And I must say it's getting easier because we've got a whole lot of more Zambian writers who are out there now, because now it's easier to reach a wider audience with the internet and things like that. So we are getting to a good place. For me personally, my journey has been such that I've seen a shift, because where I've come from, my struggles and my challenges, I'm where I am now. And now I can say with a little bit of pride and confidence that my name is Ellen and I'm a writer. I'll now, thank you so much. I'll now hand on to Mukuka, who is an amazing Zambian writer. And on the side, he's a chief, and on the side, he's an aerospace chief engineer. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Let me take the ball here. Let me share my screen here. I've got a little something here that I'll use as a little crutch to to talk through. So one moment here. So first of all, thank you so much, Ellen. I have to say I'm a big fan. She's a wonderful writer, and she's been a mentor to me, I must say, and she's helped me in my writing journey. And I also want to say thank you very much to Dr. Frida Brazel and to the ZLA Association for inviting me to be a speaker here and to share the platform with Ellen. I'm humbled. So what I'll do is, it's a short presentation here and a few slides. And what I'll start with is, I'll start by talking a little bit about myself, essentially how I see myself, and then a little bit about my journey, my two professions, if you will. And then lastly, I'll tie it all up with what it means, at least to me. So I like to think of myself as a family man and a global citizen, first of all. And I'll talk about that in a subsequent slide. On the top left-hand corner there, you see me there with my beautiful wife, Sandra, and my little daughter, Malaika, who will be turning 3 next month. You can imagine it's an exciting time. I'm also one of 4 siblings, and I grew up in a happy home with my mom, my dad in Kitwe, Zambia, and a huge, lovely extended family that we all keep in touch with even today. I'm also an aerospace engineer, as alluded to before, and an author as well. And you can see me on that picture on the right there, holding 5 Nights Before the Summit. So let me move to the next slide here. So where did it all start? My journey starts in Zambia. I spent most of my formative years growing up in Kitwe, Zambia, copper mining town, Umwina Kopala. I'm proud of it. And I lived on the Copperbelt province all the way through my teenage years. And when I was about 19, 20 was when I was awarded a scholarship to go and study for my engineering degree in the UK, in Manchester, England, specifically. Back then when the mines were sponsoring students to go and study. And so I went to the UK. It was a very good experience for me. And at that point, I really had not been thinking too much about reading for the love of reading, or indeed indulging in any writing per se at that point. I was really focused on the sciences and in trying to get my mechanical engineering degree. So I spent all in all 10 years in the UK. In my penultimate year of my university, I was approached by an engineering company that liked me and wanted to take me on a rotation program that they had. And so when I graduated, I was able to enter that program, and it coincided with the time when the mines essentially broke up, and we didn't have the ZCCM, the conglomerate that had sponsored us, and we were pretty much free to find employment where we could. And so after 10 years of living and into the latter part working in the UK, I made the transition to come to the United States, where I currently live today. I live in the Northeast in Connecticut, but I've spent time in the Mid-Atlantic, in the Washington, D.C. area as well. So one of the hats that I wear, as I mentioned before, is I'm an aerospace engineer, and my job title at present is a chief systems engineer. What does that mean? Essentially, I'm an engineer in charge of looking at what we call the air management systems on aircraft. What that is simply is we manage the flow of air through an aircraft. So anything from the air conditioning systems, which as a passenger you'll interface with directly, the quality of the air, the temperature in the cabin, and then also to things like fuel protection, how we inert fuel tanks so that they don't explode if in an event, in a catastrophic event. I've also looked at bleed systems. This is just ducting air from several stages of the engine. And then I've also had my hand in engine controls, more specifically for military applications. And you can see a little picture on the bottom right there is a fighter aircraft. It's a joint strike fighter. It's the F-35 aircraft with the F-135 engine. At the top left-hand corner, you've got a Rolls-Royce engine there. So I've worked on various components and subsystems there. And then I'd say one of my crowning glories as an engineer has been having played a pivotal role in the rollout of the design and rollout of the Boeing 787 Dreamliner aircraft on the top right. And also I've done some work with certain components on the A380 aircraft on the bottom left. So what has it taken me to get to where I am today? So I look at three things. I say one was the technical competency, which I've developed through my engineering degree and various vocational training. So there's the technical management piece. And then there's also the financial management piece, which I've tried to hone my skills by doing an MBA in financial management, focusing on finance, and then also some project management certifications and things of that nature that also help me manage high-performing teams, how we get the best out of resources that we have. And then lastly, there's the people component. I did an MBA in management as well, and that has informed much of my knowledge of how, as I alluded to before, how do we get high performing teams to work on complex programs and complex systems. So that's one hat that I wear. So I've been asked a lot, so what's an aerospace engineer doing writing novels? That's a frequent question I get. So I'll talk a little bit about my writing journey here. So I'm an author, that's the second hat. And my writing journey really starts from in earnest in about 7 years ago, in about 2013, 2014, that time frame, when I completed the first cut of my manuscript, which would later become A Casualty of Power. So as I liked what Ellen Banda Aaku alluded to, where, you know, when you begin, I'd say, you know, you're struggling a lot with the confidence, and it's a very big thing to have your work get out there, and to stand up and confidently say that, you know, I'm an author, I'm a writer. And in that respect, it does help when you reach out to folks and people that can help you, mentor you. And for me, Ellen has been one of those people that was able to read that first manuscript and give me that confidence to pursue it. So A Casualty of Power did um, exceeded my expectations. It received several awards. It was also long listed as one of 9 books in 2018 across Africa for the Etisalat Award. On the book on the top right-hand cover is Five Nights Before the Summit. That's my latest book that came out in 2019. We also received the US publication for it in 2020 with Africa World Press, and that's the new cover at the bottom left in blue. And I'll show you a link on a subsequent slide where you can access that book through Africa World Press. Another interesting project that I've been involved in of late is I started a podcast in 2019. So basically I've got a few short stories I continue to write, and some of these I couldn't really find a home for them. And I've also have this passion of introducing people to reading for the love of reading. And so one innovative way I thought of having people segue into my writing, not only my writing, but into African writing and enjoying literature, is through starting a podcast. So you can actually listen to some stories that I've written for free, and it's easily digestible. And so that has proven actually to be quite successful. Folks have liked it. They've been calling for a second series, and I'm happy to say we've got a second series that should be coming up this summer, so in a couple of months or so. And we've got some great narrators that will be taking part in that story. So what does it all mean? To me, all of this, all of what we do, the writing, albeit the engineering, it all comes to naught if it's not passed on, or it doesn't inspire somebody in some shape or form. And this is actually the part that I enjoy the most, which is trying to go around schools, talking to young people, even just my sheer presence. I've been heartened to learn how that has inspired certain young people. And it's always great when you're in a room and they've read some of your work and they identify with the characters, they identify with the story plots, the colloquialisms used in the stories. It's wonderful when they have questions, and I love doing that. I also mentor a number of folks, even through my work in aerospace. That's part of my job description as a chief. I try to mentor young people, and I actually look out for young people, especially of African descent, to help them come through the ranks. I also believe in volunteering, albeit things like Habitat for the Humanity building homes for the poor, soup kitchens, and things of that nature. I think that we all must give, and that really helps with building that quality of life, not only for yourself, but for others as well. So lastly, I'll leave you here on this slide. This is just to show you where you can find out what I'm doing. I've got a website. It's mukukachipanta.com, easy to remember. I try to keep that updated so that you know what events I'm participating in, if there are any new short stories coming out. I do have links to my podcast where you can listen to those as well. There's the second bullet point there shows the URL for Africa World Press. So it's africaworldpressbooks.com, where you can purchase my novels as well. And I'm also visible on social media, so Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, and Facebook. Again, I respond when folks write to me with questions, and they typically do. So with that preamble, I'll hand over to Dr. Frida Brazel so that we can get into the meat of today's discussion. Thank you.
Wow, Mukuka, thank you so much, Ellen. Just amazing, impressive. And you know, one thing is we always don't talk and share a lot of our accomplishments to other people. So when we hear it, it's just like we want more people to hear about it. So I know that there's lots of questions and lots of aspiring uh, engagement that's needed. So I'm not going to try and hoard the call. I'm going to ask a few questions and then we'll open it up. So I'll start with Ellen. What's your favorite Zambian food?
I think it's fish, dried fish.
Fried fish.
Dried
Oh,
boiled,
dried fish.
yes.
Okay, dried fish. Very nice. You spoke about internal conflicts. You spoke about not coming from a culture that is a reading culture and one where in Zambia, not very people will stand up and say, I'm an author. How has writing helped you grow as a person?
I think it comes slowly as you write more, as you go out there and get a response from the audience to your work. I think that comes with time. And for me, that's what helped me move from a point where it was something I was doing privately. I wouldn't go into space and talk about it until it sort of started coming to a stage where my work was out there. I think getting published, the sad thing and the reality is in most cases, Zambian writers who are out there get published outside Zambia before we're published in Zambia for a number of reasons. But I think that also helps to sort of have your book published, and that sort of says something about your work. It's sort of like a stamp of, you sort of feel, okay, then I can do this. When a publisher picks up your work and says, I want to publish it or I want to translate it. For me, the shortest answer I can give is it comes over time. It's growth. Your confidence grows as you get more of a response from the audience. And for someone like me who's published outside Zambia mainly, it's just so rewarding when a Zambian reads your book and can relate. Nothing can replace that reward of having someone from Zambia saying, I've read your work.
No, thank you. And with that said, I'm going to ask the audience, this is interactive. If you have read Ellen or Mukuka's book, why don't you go in the chat and let's see how many of you have read their books. And if not, I can assure you that on Amazon, their books are available for downloading. I'm going to switch over to Mukuka. Mukuka, on your website, you talk about as an aerospace engineer and the connection to writing, and you so eloquently shared with us how you baselined with the sciences, right? And it actually reminded me when my youngest one was getting ready to go to college, everybody in the States talk about STEM, which is science, technology, engineering, and math. But more recently, they've started saying STEAM. And it's like STEAM, science, technology, engineering, art, and math, because that art element is what really helps create that well-rounded person. But on Mukuka's website, he talks about the connection between aerospace and how it allowed him to connect his storylines, because his story is just so amazing. So Mukuka, why don't you tell us a little bit about that connection between your aerospace engineering, the skills that you've learned, and how you're able to apply it within your writing?
Thank you. Yes, on my website, if you go on, yes, I do talk about that a little bit. And to me, first of all, I don't think that writing is a singular pursuit. And by that, I mean, I don't believe that you write in a vacuum. And I think that just as you have in an engineering team, if you're building an aircraft, you're designing a subsystem for an aircraft, nobody ever does that in a vacuum or alone. And so you rely on the skill set of many other people, and you're informed, your ideas, the quality of your ideas improves by your interaction with other people. And so I think the best writing, I think, comes when you engage in life, and then you pick up all of these things, you soak all of these things from society in general, and then you embody those characters, and those make it to the page. So looking at it from that lens, I think there are a lot of parallels there. um, and I think something that we've talked about before is, in my youth, there was a point where I used to read a lot. I was an avid reader much younger, but then there was a point where I really, there was this emphasis on just because you're good at the sciences and or math, you just, that's all you do. You only read textbooks, you only read the sciences, and that's all anybody is valuing. But there's something that's lost there when we don't also engage in literature and broadening our worldview, because it's those broad ideas that then help inform you when you work on complex problems later on in life, and they help you interact with diverse populations in teams and things of that nature. So I really do think that we should really inculcate in our youth to not be so parochial in their views, and to have that arts piece as well as the sciences.
Yeah, no, thank you so much. In actual fact, a good segue. I came across this. Cheetah shared this with me last week, and I was like, oh my goodness, I don't know if you guys can see what I'm sharing, but Ellen, we heard earlier on you've segued into writing for children. Talk to us a little bit about that gap in how did you find that opportunity to write for children? And what I'm sharing right now for those that are friends of Zambians are Ladybird, like Three Little Pigs translated into Bemba, and Jack and the Beanstalk. So talk a little bit about, I don't know if anybody has seen this, but it's out there and they're introducing that. Talk a little bit about your journey writing and seeing that opportunity to cater to children.
Okay, I started writing a novel when I found time to write, for an adult novel. And then I came across the advert for Macmillan Writers Prize, and it was specifically for people to write for children. So I decided, okay, just for the discipline of writing, let me do this for children. I have found that it's a very comfortable space for me. I think the voice of a child is very engaging and interesting. And that's why I sort of default to that space. Even with Patrick, I started a book for a child, but end up moving it across. I think in basically now in writing for children, there are a lot more books for the younger age. I think where the gap is for the young adults, for the 12 age plus. And I think that challenge comes from a space where obviously most of our publishers, to make money, write for the ministries of education, because those are the big buyers. So if you want to make money, it's those. The Ministry of Education normally have boards which approve stories which they think are suitable. The challenge then becomes what is suitable for a board of education may not be what is the most engaging reading that our children want to read. And I think for me, that's where I've actually seen a gap. It has been a challenge. You find the board to come back and say, can you change this in the book because it's not teaching a proper moral. Then you have to go back and say, well, children can learn for a character who shows bad judgment. It's not necessarily just the ideal good character that you can learn from. And the reality is that our children, especially from the ages 11 plus, are getting more engaging storylines from films. They are watching they've got video games, they've got other things that are engaging them. So if we remain in that vacuum where we're writing the old sort of kind of story, already it's difficult to get them to read. We're going to have even much more of a problem. So for me, I started writing just as a default because I thought, okay, let me enter this competition. But I find for me, that's a very comfortable space. And I hope to continue writing for children.
Thank you so much for that. I'm going to segue a little bit. Mukuka, who do you read? Who are good authors for you?
So I read a vast swath of books. But my mainstay, I have to admit, what I really enjoy reading the most is African authors. I could even put a subset around that, more modern African authors. So, for example, uh, Ellen's writing appeals to me immensely. Teju Cole, Zukisa Warner, Iko Duka from South Africa, a good friend and author as well. All of these, African authors of today that are coming up, Chimamanda that we all know, and others, and many others. I'm reading a book right now, which I hadn't read before, Harare North. It's such an amazing book, and the voice of the characters is just fantastic, and that's what I want to see. That's how I would like to write, and what I would like to see our own kids reading, something that appeals to them and they can see themselves in those characters and those storylines.
Fantastic. Yeah, I'm like you. I like to read African upcoming authors, and they're just amazing. The talent, and it comes back to what Ellen shared earlier on, is we have not promoted reading or writing in Africa. We don't promote it enough, and we should, and we want to do that. Um, um, Ellen, when you start talking about how you were raised and how you tried and attempted to writing, what is your future for writers in Zambia? And as I'm saying this for our audience, I'd like for you to start getting ready to ask questions because, like I said, I don't want to hoard the call. So just talk about a little bit about what do you see as the future for reading and writing? What do you want to see happen, and how can we help support that?
As I said, I do a lot of teaching of creative writing, be it in schools or adult writers and whatever. And the one question a lot of writers ask is, or the one, not complaint, but the one issue we come across is people say in Zambia, people don't read, the same challenges. We don't have a proper publishing industry. But I think what has happened now and what is good is with the internet, there are no borders. So if you're sitting in Zambia, those excuses of our publishers are not publishing or whatever really aren't there anymore because there are no borders. There's not, all you need is a laptop. If you write a good, professional, engaging, a good, well-written story, engaging story generally from your heart, there's nothing to stop you sending it to any publisher anywhere in the world. The challenge then becomes, because the borders are open, it's got more competitive, obviously, because there are more books out there, there are more people who've got access to writing, there are more people writing. So we have to up our game. But I do think we're in a good space. I think African writing is on the agenda, be it for film, be it for books. Africa, people are looking, publishers or filmmakers have realized that Africa is a very big market. There's a big drive out there for African content. So if you're they're thinking of writing, want to write, this is the time. It's also the time for us to appreciate at a national level the importance of these opportunities that are coming. So we start preparing our young ones to be good at reading and writing. And I think that comes, yes, individual schools do it here and there, but I think there has to be a national policy to enhance or really state the values of reading outside of the school syllabus. What are we gaining as a nation if we are reading and improving our word power, our vocabulary, whatever else reading does for us, so that we can start looking forward and we can start planning and setting up our children and our young ones to be the writers of and storytellers of tomorrow.
Excellent. No, thank you so much for that. I'm going to open it up. Any questions for Ellen or Mukuka? You'll have to come off mute.
I had a question. This is Bella Siangonia from Atlanta, Georgia, for both authors. You mentioned that our reading culture is bad. It's a sentiment I've heard for many years, but today is when I'm really beginning to hear the writing culture piece also being a missing component. So based on what experiences you've had, what can we do to really improve the writing culture within our country? I saw Mukuka mentioned, for example, that he's doing workshops. I would like to hear more about that as well.
Good. Thank you. Yes, I think that it's a start when folks out there like myself, like Ellen, are going out there into the communities, into schools, into universities, and just your mere presence of for these young folks to see you there and see that it's actually possible. It's not something that's far-fetched is definitely a start. But I think more systemically, I think we do really need to look at, the issue that Ellen alluded to, where, if we're going to have these storylines, these books that are so far removed from the children's reality, I always say that if you meet a person who says they don't read, that's it's only got to be that they haven't found a book that interests them to read. Everybody will enjoy reading the right material for them. So we're not producing the right material, putting it in the hands of our young people to read. So we've really got to look at that and maybe step away from this overly puritanical view of society, which doesn't exist, and have them read something that they can identify with, plot lines, characters that they can really associate with.
Thanks so much, Bella. Any other questions? I'm going to, okay.
Oh, sorry, some people are asking in the chat.
Oh.
So we have a question from Ms. Chungu and Ms. Clara.
Claire's got a voice. Claire, do you want to go ahead and ask it? Okay, she put her hand up. Mukuka, as a busy family man and senior aerospace engineer. Okay, Claire, go ahead. Were you going to say something, or do you want me to read your question for you?
I'll go ahead. First of all, I'd like to say thank you, Z and ZL, and also to both Ellen and Mukuka. Those presentations were excellent. Thank you. My question, Ellen and Mukuka, my first one is, Ellen, I'm impressed by your creative vernacular children book series. Have you worked directly with schools in Zambia or anywhere globally? And then for Mukuka, I'm just curious to find out, as a busy family man, senior aerospace engineer, how do you typically balance your days among family, your day work, job, and writing? Thank you.
Maybe I'll go first. I think with children's books, yes, I have. It's the same issue where my books, I know in Kenya I had that challenge. I think in Nigeria I had that challenge where you're writing for young adults, and the boards seem to think, particularly in Kenya, where they came back and said, no, it's not ideal for what you've written and what we believe is a good book. Eventually they did publish it, but there are challenges. And I think it's, when you do write for children, you do want to reach as many children as possible. The way that happens is if you had to go through a school syllabus, or your book ends up on the national curriculum as extra reading, because then people go out and read your books. But there is that fence, which is, as I say, a lot of boards of education who are censoring what they feel is a good book. I do, however, had, fortunately, where there's some books that I've written, as you say, translated into Swahili or into other languages, which maybe I've got to that point because now I sort of know the publishers, and I can argue that, look, if you're going to make me change this book or this storyline, then I'll bring my manuscript back. And I think in one particular issue, it was the book of Sula and Ja, which has been published in Kenya, it's been published in Nigeria and in Zambia now. And it's more for young adults. So you have an 18-year boy who's out with his friends and his peers offer him alcohol. And he takes his drink and gets very drunk and then tries to hide from his parents that he's been drinking. Now for me, who's been a teenager once and who has children, I know that's quite a realistic story. But then the board will come back and say, no, when they're having the beer, he should say, no, I'm not going to drink it because it's not right to drink. Now, that in itself for me is a challenge, because then I'm thinking, no, but from what he does when he gets drunk and his regrets, the young readers can still learn, just to give it as an example. So we do find that most across the continent, I think the challenges for writing for children are more or less the same, because I have had these encounters with different boards of education or different publishers in different countries. But yes, the idea is I'm trying as much as possible to write books that are relatable to our children today. And the aim obviously is to reach them through working through schools and goes mainly through the government. But I do workshops as well in schools just to encourage them to read and to write. Thank you.
Thank you. I guess I'll answer the question on how I juggle things, how I find time. It's tough, but it always helps when you have the support structure. My wife Sandra definitely is pivotal in carving out some time. I think a case in point is today. She has to take the little girl out to the playground because she wouldn't have left me alone. I know. I'm grateful to family and friends for that support structure.
Thank you. There is a question that's in the chat, and Chungu's in the noisy place. Without sounding too simplistic, what was the turnaround book either author read that has stuck up to date? I hope I read that question correctly, but you all can see it as well, right?
Yeah. For me, my understanding is they want a book that has left an impression of me. Is that the question? Am I understanding it right?
See, I'm a process person. I see turnaround, I think about days. I don't know. I don't know. Maybe Chungu, you can explain a little bit more what your question, whether it's, yes, she says yes. I think you got it.
Okay. So for me, I think there are quite a number for different reasons, but one that jumps out to me is The God of Small Things that Arundhati wrote. It was written some years ago, an Asian writer. I just loved the way she captured the culture of the book, the description. And I think I do read a lot of writers from India and Asia and that part, because I think there's something about their detail. I like the way and when we talk about Zambian writing, having done workshops sometimes, and I segue a bit, but I have people submit stories to me and they've set it in New York. And the first question I ask is, have you ever been to New York? And they say no. And I'm thinking, why are you setting a story in a place you haven't been? Set it in an environment where you've been, because then you can relate the story, you've experienced that environment. And I think when it comes at the books that come out of Asia, some of them they're doing very well at that, at sharing their culture and their social values and everything else, but in a way that is a human story that applies to everybody. So for me, I think I'll go for The God of Small Things. I've probably got others as well, but that's one of them.
Okay. Yeah, it's very difficult to pinpoint one, but just as we're speaking, one that has really resonated with me. I really loved the book, The Hairdresser of Harare. If you haven't read it, by Tendai Huchu, that's a fantastic book. The voices of the characters and the culture of Zimbabwe, very similar to Zambian and very, very relatable. And I love the book so much that I reached out to the author, and that also led, one thing led to another, and that led to the marriage of myself and Weaver Press, who have been very, my publisher and been very good, because I really thought they could bring out my manuscript because of after reading Hairdresser of Harare. So I'd say that one.
Thank you so much. Chipa, you're on. Go ahead and ask your question, please. You're on mute, sir. You're still on mute.
Hi, how are you? Sorry. I think I've got two questions. I'll try to be brief. The first one, I've heard everyone comment about the poor culture in Zambia of not reading. And being a Zambian who's also moved from Zambia years ago, I found that I wouldn't say I don't read. I would read things, only things like self-help books, information kind of stuff. So I think somehow we need to emphasize, I think a whole lot of Zambians read only, like how you read in high school to study. So I think how do we change the culture from reading stuff that's only informative to a culture of reading things that are of enjoyment as well. I mean, the only books I've read that are of enjoyment are my brother's books. And it's really come from a conversation with him where he's like, hey man, I felt like, do you remember like in primary school, you used to read books just for fun. And then somehow you were channeled in high school to read stuff that was only about information. So that's my first question. My second question, if you're an aspiring author and you're thinking of writing, or you have a manuscript now, and now you want to go the route of publishers and stuff, I always feel like, because I wrote a book now and I've shared it with my brother, and I feel now like outside him, am I not taking a risk by sharing my material with someone? What if they go ahead and publish it? I don't know what you guys can say about, or are there publishers that you can trust? That, like, what is the proper route? Thank you.
If I could go first, with your first question, I think let me be the first to say it's not only a Zambian problem. I've done workshops, South Africa, Kenya, Uganda. The poor reading culture is, I think, it's all over. We've got that. There needs to be, as I say, it has to be done at national level. The drive to encourage reading from a young age, to promote reading and the values of it, to make sure that the reading materials are available so our young ones start reading and develop it. We encourage them to read from a young age. I think that's an important thing. I think also investing in the arts and having an infrastructure that promotes the industry helps, because people start seeing there's a viable option. And I think I can sort of go into a question someone has raised. If writing is something that at the moment, if I'm honest, if you're living in Zambia and you're writing, you're very unlikely to make a living out of it if you're writing fiction or writing books for children. The population for a start is small. We don't have the critical mass like countries like Nigeria. So we don't have people who will be able to buy those books where you can sustain a living out of it. So that can only happen if there is investment in the whole industry. And I'm talking about arts industry as a whole. So yes, we need, and as for reading, I think across genres, yes, a lot of people are reading more motivational books than fiction. But if you go into most bookstores and ask them how many books they're stocking, perhaps of different genres of books, the most they'll take on board is like 10 books. And even those 10 books may take 3-6 months to sell. So across board, people are not buying books, whatever the genre is. We just need to encourage any form of reading, be it informative or fiction. And I think that's just investing in the industry from the beginning. Regarding the stealing of materials, I mean, that can happen, but I think one has to protect yourself. There are ways to protect yourself. I know, for instance, in the UK, they say what you do is when you write your manuscript, you post it to yourself. So it comes back with a date stamp and then you don't open it. So at some point you'll be able to say, I wrote it first. But to be very, very honest, my experience is that there's not a lot of book stealing going on, especially now with the borders. A big publisher is not going to risk stealing your book. They've got so much more to lose. And as I say, now there are no borders. So you don't have to go to a small publisher on the side who you think, okay, will steal my book. You can go to more reputable publishers. There are so many out there who it's just not worth their while to come and steal one person's manuscript because of the damage it will do. So one just has to base themselves on trust and no risk, no gain, really.
Thanks so much, Ellen. I'm looking at the time. I think we can take 2 more questions. Mulanga, would you like to go with your question? I see your hands up.
Okay, so yeah, so hi. So just a quick one, and most of it has probably been answered, but sorry, I'll ask anyway. So when you go to Zambia, and both of you, I think, have done some kind of workshops and stuff like that. Do you ever like, I mean, what do you see as the main like hindrance, like for future, you know, writers and things like that? And you know, what do you see as the main hindrance in our nation, or maybe in the schools, or with the people that you do the workshops with? What is it, and what can the nation do, like, to embrace this arty side of Zambians and encourage them? Because as Ellen said before, I mean, when we were growing up, you say art, you say running, you say all this, it's just like, no, it's doctor, lawyer, whatever. So I mean, but when you actually go into the schools, and because you guys are writing and everything, what are the main hindrances that you see?
Mukuka, maybe you go first.
Yes, I'll try this out. So I think you hit on the problem pretty well, and I think it's a systemic problem. Having been a person in the sciences, I do recognize how, in some way we were more valued than somebody who's, good and concentrating on the arts. So I think generally we've got to take the arts more seriously. Mm-hmm. And, if I look at here in the United States, many years ago, in the 60s, John F. Kennedy, he really put structures in place in the United States where there was funding for the arts, and people with the arts can be supported. And I think it's going to take something of that nature, something of that magnitude, to really, put a structure in place where, at least a few people in the arts coming up as kids and who want to concentrate on that can see a pipeline to earning a living, sustainable living. And I think that will spawn other industries, like a publishing industry, and that's very viable. Look at Nigeria, and you look at Cassava Press, for example, and how they've been able to open, offices over in the West even as well, and they're really partial to Nigerian authors. Can we do something like that in Zambia and help support our industry? And I think it's going to take something like that. I mean, we can try to do things as individuals, as we've talked about, but I think we really got to pull together and do something. I'll call it like a Marshall Plan for the arts in Zambia, I'd say.
And it's perfect. We have to work together and support each other in our efforts. We'll do one more question with your permission. We might go a little bit over 12, because 12 Eastern, 11 Central, but one more question from Sashi, then we'll go ahead and wrap it up. Sashi, you're on.
Hi, Ellen and Mukuka. Great presentations to both of you. Ellen, you sort of touched on my question a little bit when I asked you, do you think young people can actually earn a decent living sort of being an author? But I just wanted to sort of open up the question to, do you think another reason young people aren't really going down this avenue is the definition of what being an author means? You sort of touched on this point earlier about how so many people are looking for African content now. You've got Netflix opening up its doors. I mean, I think I've watched every single African movie on Netflix at the moment. You've got sort of magazines. There's a lot of avenues that you could push the word author to try and get people attracted to that sort of profession. Do you think there is scope for that one in Zambia? And secondly, do you think we're doing enough in order to promote that avenue? Because I'll be honest, all these books sound amazing, but until I came into this forum, I hadn't really heard of any of them, and I'm an avid reader. So do you think it's a case of signposting people as well? Because you don't know what you don't know.
I think that is the case. I mean, already by nature, I think Zambians, we don't promote ourselves. It's not a natural thing for us to promote ourselves the way, let's say, for instance, Nigerians and flag themselves up. So already that's a handicap. But regarding the writing, yes, I do think there are more avenues opening up to people to write, and there's more demand for an African writer. My advice would be for Zambian writers, as I say, is sort of ignore the current environment. If you really want to start now, invest in your developing your own writing. So that's reading a lot, whether it's watching a lot of films, if you want to be a script writer. I'm doing a lot of script writing now. So it's a transition, it's a different genre altogether, but it's quite a lonely thing, is that you've got to do it on your own. No one's going to push one's writing. So once you recognize the fact that I want to be a writer, you know that there's a big market out there and the market is growing, then you get up and decide, and the writer should just get up and say, look, I'm going to do this on my own, and I know the avenues are there, and start doing their research and their homework so that you know where to place your work. And the more you do that, I think there are a lot of Zambians now, especially with script writing, because there's quite a lot of filmmaking going on at the moment, the TV series, local channels, for instance, Zambezi Magic, who I do quite a lot of work with. They're actually people who are living on their script writing incomes. So there is a progress, we are getting there. And it's about recognizing and encouraging the fact and putting value on writers as well. You know, we have to start appreciating it and know that it's a professional vocation and look at it that way. But I think we are heading in the right direction, and it's a promising time for writers.
Wow, Ellen and Mukuka, thank you so much for that. I agree that the opportunity is there. I agree that we have to work and support each other. And I've taken a few takeaways. I think for those who haven't read either Ellen or Mukuka's, I can assure you that you will not be disappointed with their writing. These are amazing writers, and I love reading as well, just as several of you have stated. And just the opportunity to know more about other writers. So with that said, Ellen and Mukuka, really, really appreciate the time that you have shared with us today. It was absolutely phenomenal. And I would also like to just share with you what's coming up next. So our next speaker, we have these every third Saturday. One thing, we've talked about culture, we've spoken about where we came from. I will say that our culture is being diluted. So one of the things that we would like to promote really is preserving our Zambian culture, our Zambian tribes, and our identity. And how can we continue to evolve and support each other? So if you don't know Mulenga Kapwepwe, I would again, everything is out there on the internet. Just Google her, you find out a little bit more about her, but she'll be coming to join us on Saturday, March 20th to talk about preserving our Zambian culture, our tribes, and our identity. So with that said, if there are any other lasting remarks, again, I would like to thank Ellen and thank Mukuka for taking time to spend with us today. I will say that it is a great pleasure, and wish you all a fantastic rest of your weekend. God bless you all.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Dr. Fida, I know people are logging up. Can I take a picture? Yeah, I think they're gone.
Oh,
We'll
Bella
catch you next time.
Okay, we still have enough. I mean, I think we had up to 50. So if you're still on, you put on your camera. And who's taking the picture? Bella, are you taking the picture? You look like you're very relaxed, though.
No, I don't. That's because I don't have host privileges. I was denied the host privileges today.
You were. I thought I gave them to you. All right, we'll take a picture then, since I've been instructed. I do what I'm instructed to. So everybody with your cheesy smiles, hi.
Hi.
Let me see. Wow, we have still lots of people on. So also I would invite you to give us feedback on when it's so good to see. I see my cousin David from Zambia. I see Margaret. This is fantastic. I didn't get a chance to see that. Claire, I see you and your better half, I assume. I see Mark Jack from Germany. This is fantastic. So I will say this, I will invite you to stay on and network some more if you like, not to just cut the call off, but you can network and see who else is on. This is fantastic. Thank you also for being a part of our journey today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
David, how
Thank you.
are you?
Goodbye.
Oh my God, did you see David Muvanga?
Where's David?
Where are you? David Bow is on.
Hi, David. Hi. I
Hi,
can
how
see
are
you.
you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good.
Excellent.
Yeah, we have everybody from all over. But if you haven't read their books, I will tell you, Ellen. In fact, since you are still on, and if you guys want to stay on, Ellen, in Your Mama First Lady, it's a political book. It's about a young girl who it reminded me of Lusaka, Studio 50, Studio 20.
22, 20, Studio 122 or something. That disco place, you mean?
Yes, she writes about that. She writes about this general. She writes about Mama First Lady. I mean, just impressive the way she writes. But then there's elements of, I think she introduces or touches on some risky areas. And I think what she was saying earlier on about how authors would be like, oh no, you can't write about this like sexuality because it's not us. We as Africans or we as Zambians, we don't want to accept certain things, right? So she touches a little bit on that. And when I finished reading the book, I said, where's the rest? I want more. So I was telling Ellen, I'm like, Ellen, you have to write a sequel to this because she wrote so well that you want to read more. And the characters that she created were just amazing. I read it last Friday night and I couldn't put it down. And it's $3.99 on Amazon, and it came on my Kindle. So if you don't have anything to do this weekend, go ahead and read it. But Ellen, talk to us about these risky things you include in your books.
For Madam First Lady, the gay relationship, the lesbian, yes. I mean, for me, it was just, I didn't go into it in a lot of detail in the sense that I was trying to make it real, because in Zambia it's there, but we tend to sort of not talk about it. So I thought I'll leave it in that same way where it's just floating along, but not really go into it. And as someone, I was at University of Zambia the other day where they're reading it on their master's program, and someone said to me, well, weren't you scared that the government will ban it because it alludes to a gay relationship? And I remember saying, well, I don't think they read, so they won't even know that it exists. So, and so far they've been reading it for 2 years. No one has said anything. So I guess they're not enough for reading to be able to even figure out what books are out there. But I think it's a matter of writing books that reflect society. And I'd encourage anybody who's writing to write like that. If it's there, it's what happens. And let's talk about the issues that are there out there.
Nelly had a question earlier that resonated with some of us who are parents, at least for me. I don't know, Nelly, if you can are you still there?
Yeah, I'm here. I'm so sorry about my toddler in the background there.
Let me run apologize for the kids.
A second. I'm gonna find a quiet corner. Yeah, so my son is very much into the arts, and he's been acting in school, he's been singing, and he plays the violin, the guitar, the piano, and he's been wanting to go into the arts. And as an African parent who was brought up to believe that, you need a career that's going to sustain you, I've been pushing him to say, hey, dude, can you, find something else that is going to bring you money that's going to pay the bills. Mm-hmm. And then when you finish that, then you can go ahead and do your arts. And so being on this call has been a really great eye opener for me, because I loved reading as a kid. I remember growing up, my step siblings used to go to private school. They went to trust school. Mm-hmm. I went to a local school in Kabwe. They went to Trust. I went to Jasmine School, which was just down the street, really on the same street. And I remember anxiously waiting for them to bring those books, the Jack and Jill and all these other books, because we didn't have those at the local school. But I had such a hunger for reading, but the material was not there. So he does take that from me. And like somebody mentioned, it gets taken away from you. You know, eventually you're like, okay, you have to study your science and your math and your this. So yeah, this has been really good, really, really good and helpful. So I'll have a conversation with him today. I'm sorry,
this
I
for me,
talked for such a long time.
it has been so great because I've just been wondering, even in our early years, they used to beat you or to, like those desks that we used to have where you could open a little bit and you can be reading. I remember I used to get so much in trouble because of reading those, James Hadley Chase, Mills and Bones, and we just there, down there, but reading Mukuka's books and I'm going to find that, political book. I love it already and I need to buy it. So I've been so inspired. I was just asking there, even in the chat, that I think this is not going to be so funny, where you've got so much information, you've got so much, like for me, I've got so much information, I've gone places. I can put a story anywhere. I can put a story in Iceland, I can put a story in Romania, I can put a story in the Netherlands, being the first young woman to have run the cheese market. I can place stories everywhere. But I just can't start writing. I don't know which one to start. So I've just been writing, like I've got a whole page of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 18 books, which I haven't started. And the last time that Mukuka was home, I was saying, can you just write one book, The Power of Networking to Serve? Because that really has inspired a lot of people. And even when I speak to people that I was elected as the first woman of color to lead an international organization, I was elected in Romania, became president in Iceland, my Netherlands. So I'm saying, where can I start from? Just that. And, when we used to have no internet and they could ask you, how do you end up here? And I would tell them, I'm clever than you. And so these things, they run through my head and I just say, how can I put this thing on pen and paper? And I like to engage myself in service, in the things that I can do that I know the next person cannot do. So I'm always offering, these things, and I can write tons and tons of books about it. I can write tons and tons about just managing sickle cell, and things like that, because I've got the experience. I've had, God bless me with an asthmatic child, with a sickle cell child, all these things, and yet I've been able to do anything that I've always wanted. So I've got so much to write, such that I've got no space where to start from. So I'm very inspired today, and I know that one of these days I'm going to actualize this, and I will. I don't want to. I want to die empty.
Can I ask a last question, please? This is for Ellen. It's about a short story I read in the anthology I've got it here, for New Daughters of Africa, and it's a story called 87 Tankmere Court. And I just really wanted to ask about your inspiration for writing that book, because it's a diaspora, the story. It's a diaspora story, and sometimes I find that it's difficult to write. If I haven't been home for a while, it's difficult to write those. So I just really wanted to know your inspiration for writing that short story.
I'm trying to remember. Okay, yes. I think for me, it's more about dementia, isn't it? I wanted to write something about dementia without being too preachy about it. And then I thought, for a change, because I've done most of my books, I do set them in Africa. I thought, let me try and set it here, but still in my mind, the main characters were African characters, even though I didn't really say Zambian. I think I just sort of left it general. So what I try to do mainly for me is I always, whenever there's, and for that particular one, it's when there's a call for a story and I'm thinking, I don't have a story just growing within me, but I have to think about something. So I came up first with the subject matter and I thought dementia. And then I thought, okay, if I place it in the UK, let me place it outside of Africa, but let me talk about dementia, who normally gets dementia. So I think I started from the old, the grand, it was the mother, the grandmother.
Your grandmother.
And then because I go back to my comfort zone, which is the voice of a child, I decided to show, and I sort of like to write from the voice of a child because I like the way they view the world and how they experience it the same as an adult, but the way they'll say it or narrate it is a bit different. So that's what really inspired me. It was more me thinking, okay, I need to write a story, there's a deadline, and let me touch on dementia as a subject. And then as usual, go to my comfort zone, which is have a young adult. And that's the way I did that. And because obviously, as I say, I like to write about spaces I've been in. And I encourage most writers to do that because I was like in the UK, so I've been here for so many years. I was able to sort of occupy that space and write about it. I think it's one of the few books that I've actually written that's outside. Apart from Madam First Lady, I think there's a chapter that's set outside Africa, but most of the times I just default to what I'm comfortable with, which is urban Africa.
Thank you.
And one last question from Tabitha.
Hi, thank you both for sharing. Unfortunately, I got in here a little bit late, but I'm just really excited to know that there are some Zambian authors that are writing nonfiction, fictional stories and things like that. I was introduced, I want to say, to like African literature or stories that take place in Africa from that #1 ladies detective agency, but then that's coming from a white man. So I was like, oh, good. Now I know about you all. But I was wondering if you all are also, do you know people that are writing memoirs? And I only say that because, you know, lately with some of the deaths that have been happening, I attended a funeral last week with someone that when they were just going through his life history, because he was an older man that was part of the whole revitalization of Zambia after colonialism, it just seemed like, man, his life history is so rich and everything that he was doing just seems so rich that we need to have this in our books, that we need to have this story be told to everybody. So I was wondering if you ever do any dabbling in memoir writing or encourage others to write memoirs about people that are living today, or even biographies about people that are living today or past.
I think that's a very, very interesting question because I feel we don't have enough stories about the African living in Northern Rhodesia. A lot of our parents and all and they've had different experiences. There are those who are political fighters who are fighting, but there are a whole lot of them who are not even interested in the politics, but have lived their life. And I think if we don't capture that, my fear is we're going to lose it. So I do think that we need to write more about what our parents, their Northern Rhodesia experience outside of the political realm. For me, because I do a lot of writing, ghost writing. So I do have sort of ventured into the memoir space. Here in the UK, it's easy. Someone comes up to you and you write their memoir, and they're more open. We come from a culture where a lot of us back home don't talk a lot about from a personal perspective. So I can't tell you the number of Zambians who have gone to Zambia. They've arranged a meeting with me to say they want to write their life story. I've spoken to them and then they don't come back. And I think it's because I do say, you've got to be very, very brave to write your life story. Because if you're going to write it well, be prepared to be vulnerable, to be able to laugh at yourself, be able to admit to regrets and mistakes. But that also becomes a challenge because depending on how you grew up and where you're set, we're not so open, we're not so comfortable being open. Mm. So I have had a number of people who've sat me down, had a session and said, and when I tell them, look, if it's going to be a good memoir, it can't just be about the good things that you've done. We want to see the flip side as well, because we all have a flip side. And it's going to be a challenge. There are moments when you think, do I really want to do this? There are moments when you think, what do my siblings say? If I bring them in, you have to think of family. You've got to be very brave to do it. And a lot of times so far with the Zambians, I haven't succeeded with anybody coming back. I don't know what Mukuka's experience has been.
I think I would totally agree. I've just had the experience of just talking in passing. I haven't been asked specifically, but people, kind of allude to that and say, hey, help me write my memoir. Mm-hmm. But like you, I'm thinking I don't really know whether they know indeed what they're signing up for, because mm-hmm. you've got to be extremely open, extremely frank, warts mm-hmm. and all. Everything's mm-hmm. got to come out, and nobody wants to read a sanitized
exactly
version of yourself. They want to really get to the guts of what what your life story was about. So I totally agree.
All right. Well, you know what? I think Claire has got a comment that she has a manuscript, a memoir that she's about to publish. Is that correct, Claire?
Yes, you're right. Thank you. I actually, it's funny how one day I was trying to see if I could get on a TED Talk kind of thing. And one of the requirements was that I write, I tell my story. And so I literally sat down and just got in that moment that you rarely get into. And so, I was surprised with myself, and I actually was picked to do this TED Talk training. But then it also coincided with my starting a new job. So for now, right now, I'll go ahead with the job, but I won't abandon my plans to publish that manuscript someday. So I'll be reaching out to my brother Mukuka. But I was proud of myself for doing that. It literally just came in 2 hours and I was done.
Wow. All right. Well, if we keep you on, then you won't come back next time. So Ellen and Mukuka, again, thank you so much for spending time with us, and to each and every one of you that have signed in from all over the world. We really appreciate you. I'm looking forward to getting feedback from you all on the session, but also feedback on Ellen and Mukuka's books, because you will not be disappointed. I can assure you that you will enjoy their books. So with that said, God bless. I am going to end it this time for real. Have a great rest of the weekend. Bye-bye.